Terry, I have a question for you.
All right.
How do you define discipline?
I have a definition.
No, I want yours.
Mine, uh, discipline for me is a way to do the things that I want to do.
Oh,
It's a we all have goals. We all have a way that we want our life to go daily, like the little things and the big things. And for me, and this is not some David Goggins shit, but for me, I swing for the fences. I want to do big things. And you don't do that without discipline, or I don't do that without discipline. So for me, discipline is a bridge. It's a means to achieve the things that I want to do. To
so
be
you want stuff,
no, no, no.
and
Yeah,
then you have
well,
to
yeah,
figure out. Then to get the stuff, you have to do the things to get the stuff.
yeah, but don't see it through just a material prism. I want to get stuff, but the stuff that I want to get is not things per se. It's I want to be present for my children. I want to be healthy. I want to be smart and sharp from 5 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. I want to be able to have the physical, emotional, and mental acuity to enjoy life. And part of that is just is achievement. Part of it is acquisition of some sort, but mostly it's being present.
Do you know what juggalos are?
Gigolos or
No,
juggalos?
juggalos.
I do know what gigolos are.
Juggalos. It's the term for fans of the Insane Clown Posse. The I guess it's rap metal act. It's the posse of clowns that are insane. But I guess you could, I wouldn't. I don't quite want to call them a band, but they are a music act, and
Yeah, it's just
their fans are called Juggalos. And once a year, for the last 20 plus years, they've had a gathering of the Juggalos, which is just a music festival where all the Insane Clown Posse fans go. A lot of face paint, a lot of wrestling.
that has to be held at a casino. Like at this point, at this point, that's like casino stuff or fair, state fair.
Yeah, it's
Arkan,
very so it's held at state fair esque
yeah,
grounds wherever they can be. So I was before I got on here, I was watching a documentary about the gathering of the Juggalos, and I think those people, Juggalos, who identify as a Juggalo to the point of getting Juggalo tattooed across the chest. I'm not sure because I haven't finished the documentary, but I think if you wake up in the morning and you're like, I want a party, and that's your goal, then you're a Juggalo.
and that requires some discipline,
Dedication.
I would say. Yeah.
Oh yeah, dedicate. Well, so this is a question: dedication and discipline. Can they be separated in your mind? And then I'm going to come back to definitions.
Yeah, I think they're somewhat synonymous. Um, I think they're somewhat synonymous, and I think I think discipline. Um, yeah, there are fuzzy distinctions, but I think there is certainly a lot of overlap.
I think it's hard to be disciplined without action. It's pretty easy to be dedicated in your heart, in your mind, but not necessarily in your actions.
That's a great distinction. It's a great distinction. So you asked my definition of discipline. You dropped a bomb on one of our prior episodes that I think you need to account for now. You don't
Yeah,
believe in discipline. Is this correct?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure I believe in discipline. That's what I said. And so I'm not going to walk back my words. I said I don't think I believe in discipline or I don't believe in discipline.
Now we're going to get a master class on parsing and nuance
No, no, no.
and
I'm gonna go straight to so discipline. There are a couple different meanings. I'm ignoring all verb meanings of discipline. So I'm not talking about punishing a kid for doing something they've done wrong. I'm not talking about the verb discipline. the noun form of discipline, there are a couple different related but not the same definitions. And I'm just going off of the Oxford Dictionary via Google here. So I'm just going to read them here. So the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. So I'm not really talking about that discipline. So it's not like there's a rule and you're punished and that's discipline. I'm going to put that aside because I think what we're talking about is a different definition, which is the activity or experience that provides mental or physical training. So this is, I'm practiced at a discipline, or I am disciplined in the way that I live my life, or that I partake of this thing or that thing, or the way I do stuff. So we're strictly talking about that training component. We're talking about like mental and physical, practice. That's the domain I'm talking about when I say I don't necessarily believe in discipline. Are we agreed on definitions?
I think, yeah. I don't think we're interested in a discussion about correcting children's behaviors in this topic.
Or grown-ups. Like you can have
Correct.
childish grown-ups that go to the gathering of the Juggalos and wreck property, and I'm not terribly concerned with disciplining them.
Agreed.
So my complaint with discipline is complex because I feel that, as a thing that has been preached over millennia, the value of discipline, and a thing that has been generally disregarded and ignored over millennia or failed at. I have a hard time aggressively buying into the importance of a thing that we know people are failing at over and over and over again all the time. So if we start with the premise that, only some small subset of people are disciplined, but everybody else should try to be more disciplined, and if only you can, if only you try harder or have more willpower or something like that, you will achieve discipline, such as, some small sliver of those who are disciplined. I think that's unhelpful.
So let's do this. Discipline is an umbrella concept.
Yeah.
Let's bring it down into and I think, I made the cheesy and I think relevant assertion sometime back on one of our earlier episodes that I think certain forms of discipline are superpowers for a human. So let's quantify those three, and is that all encompassing in terms of, if the umbrella term that we're talking about here is discipline, I say that there's emotional discipline, which is sort of conceptually is one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot in terms of being disciplined emotionally. And
So you're talking about self-control.
Self-control and steady, what we would say of a person who is steady or even or doesn't get pulled to the emotional fringe, whether that's anger, whether that's sadness, whether that's, volatility of any sort, emotionally disciplined. And I think that's an aspect of discipline that doesn't get discussed a whole lot, that I think is equally as important as the other two, which are more common. Physically disciplined. So I think this is where most people's awareness and understanding of the term discipline comes down. Work of some sort, whether it's to maintain physical prowess, or discipline with a job, or how you eat. Do you eat discipline? Those sorts of things.
Lose weight, get strong.
Correct. So I think that is, David Goggins, I think, is how most people appreciate discipline. And if you don't know who David Goggins is, he's a former Navy SEAL that was over 300 pounds and now does insanely physically rigorous things. Preaches discipline. It's a big thing, and we need it. But that's physical discipline. So we have emotional and physical discipline. And then I think there's also intellectual discipline. So the discipline to seek and to not subscribe to superficial mantras, or to question, or to be skeptical, or to want to understand how and why things work. I think there's an intellectual component to discipline as well.
All right. I have a hard time saying that I'm against all of those things, or that I don't believe in them. So I think that my complaint here is a little narrower and it has to do with the nuance of habit versus willpower. So, generally speaking, I think the notion that um, failure to lose weight, failure to get strong, failure to clean up your finances, like any of these, think of the most superficial, infomercially ish. You're going to improve your life with whatever the infomercial late night thing is. All of those quote unquote failings, I think, have almost nothing to do with lack of discipline as a character trait. I think it has almost everything to do with lack of personal systems, social systems to support the personal systems, um, approaches to how things are done, habit and routine. Which maybe all of that stuff combined
Is
leads to
discipline. Yeah.
discipline, but I think that uh, distilling down like the problems you have with health, finances, romance, like kind of the big hot itchy scalp flakes, all the magic tonic type stuff that you want to solve. It doesn't really come down to a lack of willpower, and the reason I say that's most likely is because by almost any measure, almost everybody is lacking that willpower. The whole reason that we still have, get rich quick schemes and lose weight fast schemes is because mostly they don't work. And when I say mostly, I mean overwhelmingly they do not work, which is not an indication to me that the next one is going to work if we only just get a slightly better one. And it's not an indication that all of the people for whom they don't work are failures in the sense that they are doing something wrong.
Okay, so what are you saying then? And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but what are you saying then? That um, there is a biological or physical component to lack of discipline that's beyond an individual's
That's
control.
that's almost exactly the way I'd put it. Yeah, people are inherently lazy, so willpower as a path to discipline is unlikely. However, people are lazy and don't like to change. Therefore, small incremental habit changes is a path to discipline because everybody wants to do the thing they're already doing the most and not the next thing. So if you get yourself used to doing the thing that looks like a disciplined approach to physical fitness or disciplined approach to diet, if you just get to where that's the thing that you do and the thing that requires the least thought and the least sort of top of mind effort, and then you just do it automatically, that will you will be disciplined, but it'll be because you did the thing that is lazy, not because you did the thing that is overcoming laziness. You know what I mean?
So I think my pushback, unfounded in any scientific theory, but my pushback on the notion that discipline or lack of discipline is inherent is that evolutionarily,
I think that's a word.
I'll go with it. Evolutionarily, if you didn't have discipline, you didn't survive as a species. You didn't survive as a member of the herd or the tribe because there is a discipline to we get up at this time, we have these things that we have to do to survive as a species. So I would say that is a trait that has been selected for biologically. You have to be disciplined to survive. However, we've distilled with modernity, we've distilled that risk out of society. So there's more of a choice. Um, not that, again, we're big on saying this is not a value assessment or a value judgment, it's an objective assessment. Whether you agree with that is a good or a bad thing, it's a plausible point to consider that modernity has afforded folks to not be disciplined, given them the choice not to be. Because I would say biologically, if you didn't have discipline up through 150 years ago, let's say, seems to be industrial revolution more or less post that, but 150 years ago, 100 years ago, if you weren't disciplined, your family didn't survive.
Are most people now disciplined?
No.
Give me
I mean,
like some ballpark.
oh,
What
here we
share of
go.
people are disciplined?
Here we
But
go.
like, are we talking about the top quartile is disciplined? Are we talking about the top 5% are disciplined? Just very broad strokes here.
Again, we have to define what specific aspect we're evaluating. I think there is an embedded discipline in holding down a 9 to 5 job that is enough to sustain a family on. That is a discipline. That is a choice. That is a discipline, because surely there are a lot of people that don't feel like doing that. So earning an income is a form of discipline that I think is not a problem, or is a problem maybe in the tails.
Well,
Uh,
you're pointing out a very useful reversal here. So I'm complaining about discipline versus willpower. Not even versus discipline as it relates to willpower. But if you ask me about being undisciplined, I would just say being undisciplined is horrible and it will cause all kinds of problems for you. Right? Like
for sure.
there I have as much as I will, split hairs about discipline as a concept, we talk about being undisciplined and we talk about the downsides of being undisciplined. It's like it's everywhere, it's ubiquitous. Uh so many problems with so many different things would all be resolved if the lack of discipline went away, which by extension must mean that if you were disciplined this would be less of a problem. So I think that the thing I'm trying to avoid has less to do with discipline the concept and more the application that gets you the path to discipline. So
I
where discipline is shorthand for just a little bit more willpower would get you to the point where you would have discipline. I think that's a shortcut that doesn't work in practice, and we see that it doesn't work in practice.
but I don't think it changes the validity of the concept of discipline, or the requirement that each individual has to be disciplined.
So okay, let me back up to your modernity question. Humanity more or less disciplined now than 150 years ago?
What aspect? Way less. Way less. And this is one that I'm not going to receive your, okay, what was the quantity of it then
No,
versus
no,
the
I'm not.
quantity of
We're
it
we're pretty
now.
far we're pretty far away from quantifiable numbers,
Yeah.
which I have things to say about on this subject too. But
I think the far right tail, in terms of the ultra successful,
yeah,
are way more disciplined today
yeah, that makes sense.
because it's harder.
So split it into the tiniest little uh, sliver of an example, which may or may not generalize to other things, but that's not going to stop me from torturing this example anyway.
So
Baseball pitchers 2023 versus baseball pitchers 1960. It's like it doesn't even compare.
so that specific point, thank you for bringing this up, because that specific point, I don't know that we can draw a broader parallel from what I'm going to say, but that specific point I fully agree with. Babe Ruth would not make it if he were transplanted as he were in 1920, whatever. He would not make it in today's game. Period. Hard stop.
Yep.
Regarded as the best baseball player ever, was hitting off grocery store clerks and longshoremen. Hard stop. Babe Ruth would not make it in today's game. However, there's a huge nuance and a huge caveat. Babe Ruth, that person with that skill set, born in 1998, that was raised in today's nutrition with today's coaching, would probably still be the same level of great that Babe Ruth was.
It
So
also, you also don't necessarily have to detract from the greatness in the sense that
100%,
everybody's playing their own game in their own time, right? So that
100%.
it makes perfect sense.
But I think the question is, and it's a good point. I think it's harder today. I'll use another example. Um, Rockefeller, or one of the great barons of an earlier era. That's not the same as building Tesla today. It's a different ball game. I think there's still discipline. It's just harder to do that. I think the parallels between those two examples are the same. Like there's a lot of the discipline of that day was more physical and coercion and who swung the biggest stick, figuratively and probably literally in some cases. But today, it may still be that way, softer. But today, there are way more complex variables to solve for to achieve the same thing. So I think in the far right tail, discipline folks like who would be more disciplined in the history of the world than Musk? Hate him, love him, doesn't matter. Um, you know, rumor has it he doesn't sleep a lot, or if he does, he's on a cot in an office, and those sorts of things. So I think the discipline required today to be ultra successful and very technical in the far right tail, the far right distribution, I think it's harder.
I think a little bit of the where we're coming to different places is over specifying on a narrow set of criteria for goal setting and success and building, and it's sort of overemphasizing this great person concept, right? So great business,
For
great
sure.
mind, great thinker, great politician, great leader, great general, whatever. That concept is very much in contrast with my thinking about, think about an unknown Shaolin monk practicing discipline and doing his exercises and pounding into the stone of the temple from doing the same routine every day, every day until you have divots in the floor, right? So that internal individual, uh, you know, we're all just dust in the wind, kind of discipline, I think has a huge impact on almost anybody who is in any, like, regardless of your station in life or what you're born into. That sort of internal, inward looking, self-centered practice of discipline, physical, mental, emotional, all of that stuff is relevant to anybody. Whereas, personally, I think that while it's useful to observe what are the people that are at the very tippy top of the business world, or people in power, I think it's useful to observe that stuff, but I'm not sure it's relevant
For
for
sure.
a typical person to say, okay, well, if Jeff Bezos did this, which parts of Jeff Bezos should I be emulating? Because the lessons you get from Jeff Bezos, they might be they might be applicable broadly, but they might not be applicable broadly because there are just things that are fundamentally different. So this is one of the things I wanted to explore in this concept, in this discussion about discipline, was what happens when conventional wisdom. So the idea that this is basically the science-less version of discipline. Is it is good to be disciplined, because if you're undisciplined, chaos will enter your life. This is something that is inherently understood, right? I don't think that this is something anything more than fundamental human understanding, that being rigorous and disciplined is better than being chaotic. And sure, you can be creative and you can be spur of the moment, but if your life devolves into chaos due to lack of discipline, bad things will happen, right? Like, I don't need science to to back this. This is
But
this is the realm of the philosophers. You know what I mean?
but I think it's not a binary Zen versus chaos.
Right.
There are multiple points along that spectrum, and too many people, while it might not quite make it to chaos, the lack of discipline has, I would say, the vast majority, and we're talking about our culture, but probably applicable to most cultures. Well, we're talking about our culture. Most people don't have to make it to chaos for the quality of life or the
Did
experience to be shit, to be crap. And I think that's the important point: is it's not a binary. I'm disciplined and life is great, or I don't have discipline and I'm on the streets. There's that less than 50% spectrum of quality of life where most people spend the vast majority of their life. Most people spend a lot of their lives feeling anxious or sad or depressed, or we're and this is again an objective assessment. So many things from a policy perspective are impacted by our obesity rates and our lack of discipline with physical exercise and the ability to eat moderately, not even David Goggins version, but moderately. So I think there's the binary. If one end of the spectrum is chaos, one end of the spectrum is bliss. It doesn't mean if you're not at one end of that spectrum that discipline's not super important, because I think most people, if you take the midpoint, most people live their lives below the midpoint, and that's a miserable existence. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. And I agree with you completely. And I think that attainable discipline depends on some sort, we're talking about sort of basic foundational philosophical views on the world. So if you believe in predestination, not in terms of whether you're going to heaven or hell, but if you kind of believe that you're handed your lot in life and there's not much you can do about it, and circumstances are the primary driver in what happens to you and how you're feeling, there's a certain defeatism to that where regardless of how good or bad you have it, when you compare yourself to your immediate adjacent people, if you think that you have it slightly tougher than everybody else around you because of circumstances, that does you a disservice. And that has nothing to do with where you are nominally. It has everything to do with whether you feel like you are given less than all of those immediately around you.
So the point that you just made is a flag in the ground, a flag that I would like to plant in the ground. And this is one of my core principles. Assume whatever in the West, again, we're talking about there are some cultures globally where you are a victim of where you're born. And that's historically been the case. That's the beauty of this country that I think is lost on a lot of people in trivial, superficial fighting, is that this is the one place in the history of the world. There are others now, but the one place in the history of the world that with ideas and ambition, you can change your station in life. And some would argue how much, but that's not debatable. But the point is, here in the West, regardless of what grievance one might have, not to minimize the grievance, because each individual's experience is their own, is his or her own. But regardless of what experience you have or where you start or what challenges or limitations you've been confronted with, the onus is still on you to be great, to work, to be disciplined, because there are things we can do from a policy perspective to incentivize that, or to make distill some of the risk out of the bottom end of that spectrum, the bottom end of that distribution. But it's still up to each of us. Our well-being is up to us. And
I think I can go better with your well-being starts, well-being starts at home with yourself. I think that part is pretty unambiguous. I think that again, I kind of caution to watch out for use of greatness, because like that not everybody agrees with your definition of greatness, and not everybody is striving for greatness in the sense that you're describing it.
so I want to push back there. No, the definition of greatness, and I don't accept the definition of greatness is that Elon Musk is the only definition of greatness, or Jeff Bezos, or choose your famous artist,
I
whoever.
mean, you believe in self-actualization, meaning it's important to understand what you want. Nobody can tell you what you want, only you. If you don't figure out what you want, nobody else can figure it out for you. And if you don't know what you want, you're never going to be able to get what you want because you have no idea what you want.
And that requires discipline. But
Yeah.
I think greatness to me, it is, it's probably silly to even conceptualize this, but I think greatness to me is uh, setting hard goals for yourself in your circumstance at that time and achieving those goals. and it doesn't mean materially, it doesn't mean from an achievement perspective. It means the goal could be, I want to feel better. I want to be able to walk up and down the stairs without everything cracking and
Yeah.
hurting. And whatever that goal is, that's greatness. That is greatness. It's that, okay, here are the things that I want to change, or I want to do, I want to accomplish, or realize. It's the ability to realize things consistently in your own life, to realize them. And that is greatness. And there's no dollar attached to that. Typically it does happen, but it's greatness is it's a broad umbrella term.
All right, I'm gonna steal your flag and I'm gonna pivot it. My flag in the ground is that the onus is on you to find fulfillment.
For sure.
Pretty darn similar to yours.
No, but that's a less materialistic sort of work centered version, definition of what I said, and I agree with it.
How much do you think in your whole life or in your day to day? How much time do you spend thinking about individualism versus collectivism?
Talib has some interesting points on this that I won't get into, but I don't spend that much time thinking about it. I spend a lot of time thinking about the collective is a lot more impacted by a whole bunch of individuals making the right choice.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you can top down any of this stuff. I don't think the collective, the narrative of the collective can impact, again, individual choice unless it's incentivized heavily. And maybe that's what you're asking. And
It was a lead up question because comparing primarily individualistic society versus primarily collectivist society, it's not really a flip side of a coin. It's simply an alternative thing to emphasize. So if you and I are talking about, the onus is on you to be great, the onus is on you to find fulfillment, collective results come from individual decisions, all of that is very staunchly individualistic in the sense that it's primarily pointed at single people. There is a not necessarily directly competing philosophy per se, although it does end up competing in a lot of ways, sort of in geopolitics. But an alternative view is your role in society is the most important thing about your life, and that means that how you adhere to tradition, how you adhere to family, how you adhere to morals that have to do with respect for elders versus the role of kids versus the role of young children, all of that stuff. There is the thing that matters most is all of us, and the thing that matters most is each of us. And those two things, while sometimes in competition, are not always in competition, but they are two pretty different worldviews. If what you put first is me and everybody else individually versus we and everybody else collectively. And those two things can inform a lot of what happens next. And I think that generally speaking, I guess I was framing this all up and setting this all up to say, I think it's possible that there are some people who are kind of at the tail end of misery, right, in contemporary American society, who would be a lot better served by collectivism, by a more collective culture. But I'll put a percentage on that and say, we're talking about like the bottom 20% most miserable people would be better off, maybe even less than that, would be better off the if society was organized around the collective as opposed to the individual. Now, none of this is to say that society revolving around the collective instead of the individual, when turned into political systems and economic systems, like all bets are off, because now we're not talking about the philosophy. Now we're talking about the actual practical implementation of these things. And that's a whole different level. Anyway, basically a side detour over to collectivism.
So have you heard of the concept of the Maharshi effect?
No.
So this is loose. But there are studies that have evaluated. So I practice TM. I think I've mentioned that.
Yep.
Not in this granola sort of, um, you know, voodoo sense, but in a, this is a scientific technique that has worked wonders for me. But the Maharshi effect is essentially that the more people in a specific geographic area that practice meditation changes the sort of the construct of that geographic area. Crime is lower. Um, people, occupations, people
All
feel more
well being indicators all go up.
or all go up. And so, um, there haven't been real rigorous studies on this, but there are some loose studies on this. And I think, even if anecdotally, I think that's it makes sense that the more people that um, are brighter in a given area, then hopefully that rubs off, their kids at school. And if teachers have at least some proportion of kids in the classroom that are more pleasant to be around, these are all hypotheticals, but all of those things make sense conceptually, even if not proven scientifically. That the more uh, the greater number of individuals contributing to the sort of things that matter in society collectively, the more benefit for the collective good.
Well, I mean, let's talk about stands to reason and logically sound versus science, because that's I would say I am as fixated on habit as, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth and say you're fixated on discipline, but you're certainly very interested in discipline and it's important to you. I am fully fixated on habit. And I don't think it's not an accident. There was, I went to school for economics, and while I was doing my undergrad in econ, I don't know why I said while I was doing my undergrad. That implies that I continued school beyond that. I didn't. While I was in school for econ as a college student, I studied econ. Behavioral economics was becoming a field. There had been a couple of Nobel Prizes handed out for behavioral economics, which behavioral economics is essentially just measuring counterintuitive reactions to inputs or stimuli. So if a person does something that seems counterintuitive, but you peel the onion back 2 layers, you realize that actually there was a more complex game going on in their mind than it seemed like on the surface. That's the long and the short of behavioral economics, is trying to form science behind that and actually study this, create theorems, do rigorous and testable scientific research around it, so on and so forth. So anyway, that behavioral economics was becoming popular. Right around the time I graduated, the Freakonomics book had been out for a year or two, and then pivoted into a podcast, and then pivoted into a TV show. And that was sort of the the most popular take on behavioral economics. Follow the path forward, and there's this increasing body of study about sort of transactional decision making, which is sort of psychology, sort of self-helpy, very heavily like econ influenced, but it's not really traditional economics per se. And that path leads directly to the 2018 book by James Clear, Atomic Habits, which I thought was an interesting read that could have been a pamphlet. It's one of these self-helpy, businessy type books that everybody loves, and it's on the New York Times bestseller list. And you get assigned to read it by somebody after, you're not in school, and you don't really have to do what these people tell you, except that they're your boss. But they say you should really read this book, and then you have to sit around and discuss it in some fashion. And you're like, this is not as formal as school, and I'm not being tested. Anyway, it's a read the table of contents type of book, and it's a very fine line between what parts of Atomic Habits are rehashing conventional wisdom and what parts are sort of bringing new and recent scientific findings to kind of like old conventional wisdom. You know what I mean? Is this making sense as a concept?
It does. Yeah, it does. I think all of those things to me, though, and this is an overly simplistic way of looking at it, but I think all of those things to me come down to I could write all these books for these people, just different examples.
Yeah.
You have to do hard stuff. You have to do hard stuff when you don't want to do hard stuff. And you have to do hard stuff when you would rather do the fun, easy stuff. You have to do hard stuff. No one escapes that unless you're a trust fund kid. And even then, at
No,
certain,
that definitely doesn't work because you have different goals if you're a trust fund kid.
then I mean, you still have to, you know, I think,
The life of a trust fund hedonist is not like this is not a path to joy. All you do
right.
is you adjust your yardstick, and you don't care about amassing wealth because you already have that. So what you want is you want to amass meaningful relationships, or you want to amass, experiences, or you want to amass influence, or you want to amass, good works, or whatever it is. So you have a totally different set of goals that are not around financial well-being. So I think it makes no
Still,
difference if you're independently
still
wealthy.
still requires, so then
Yeah.
the statement is a blanket when it's a law, it's a theorem, then you have to do hard stuff. And I think that is for me, whatever, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whether it's intellectual, there are other forms or sort of slices of discipline that could be looked at in a vacuum. But for me, those things, all of them have and continue to require me doing hard stuff. And that's not with the goal of I want to be Elon Musk. That's not the goal of that. That's I want to live a fulfilled life. I want to be present for my children. I want to take on challenging things beyond sort of the station in life where I entered this spot. I want to do different things. And for me, that's what discipline is in all of these aspects. I want to, I want to feel good all day. You got to do hard stuff. And you have to do hard stuff when it's in competition with the easy, fun stuff. And I think that's what all these books could, they could be 100 pages of you've got to do hard stuff. You've got to do hard stuff and just list examples of that. That's my take.
Do you find the hard stuff that you're doing as part of your discipline? Do you find it? I mean, does it feel hard when you're doing it?
Some things do. Some things do. I tinker with things. I don't like to be cold, and the cold plunge is not pleasant. But that's like just the big broad brush things. No, like I've done, and this is the other aspect of this that we hopefully can sort of tease out here in the last few minutes is once you start with the commitment of this is where I am. This is how I want this to change. These are the steps of this is what discipline looks like to deliver that outcome. Once you start, there's a commitment to that and you take steps to that, it becomes habit and it
Right.
becomes easy. So for me, for every day, literally every day, regardless of the weather, regardless of where I am, if I'm in Europe, if wherever I am, I get up, I have a little routine, read, blah, blah, blah. I go run 2 to 3 miles every day, every single morning. I also do weight training. But for me, that is as much a part of my life as brushing my teeth.
Right.
Doesn't hurt. It's not hard. It's just that's what I do after this and before that.
Yeah.
And and
You're capturing a very critical point. Which, if discipline is positioned as a matter of willpower, then you have every person on earth who can't run 3 miles right now, which, by the way, is more than half of them. Uh, every person who can't do that is saying, well, Terry must just be more disciplined than me.
but
I could never. They're saying that I'm putting myself in the. I'm a juggalo, and I'm hearing you say this. I'm a Jerry Springer audience member, and I'm hearing Terry on stage explaining how running 3 miles is just part of his life. And the answer is it's a wall, and that wall is, well, it's not a part of my life, and I'm not
yeah,
like Terry, and that's it. And
yeah.
it's an insurmountable obstacle when you treat it as a matter of willpower. If what you treat it as all you did was you ran a mile for a bunch of days, then you ran a mile and a half for a bunch of days, then you ran 2 miles for a bunch of days, then you ran 3 miles for a bunch of days, and before long you had years of it. Now you don't think about it. literally anyone can do that.
Yeah. For me, it was less about being, because I came up as an athlete, so it was less about being able to run 3 miles and more about, well, I drank. This is in my early 20s. I drank with the guys last night, and I don't feel like getting up and doing this. So this day I could take it off, or that day I could take. It's the looking for things to be excuses for why I don't do it at all. Not that I can't do the 3 miles. That's my story, not necessarily everyone else's. But I think your point is, I think, very, very important. And this is a conversation I have with my son a lot.
Man, kids
Is
don't get this at all. No,
yeah,
no kid gets this.
and this is what I try to impress on him. I said, as you stand here today, you're trying to solve for the finality of this thing.
That's right.
You're trying to go from I don't run at all to I'm doing what dad does after doing this as a practice for 30 years,
That's right.
running 650 7-minute miles for 3 miles every single day, regardless of the weather. And when you look
If you're
at
not a
it,
runner, that's pretty fast.
it's pretty fast. But again, there are a lot of people faster. I don't think of it in those terms.
There
But
are a lot more people less fast than that. But anyway, please, I'm just trying for those who don't partake of the asphalt here.
It's pretty quick for an old person, but for him, the point is yes, if you look at your starting point today of 0 days running at all to I've got to run every day 3 miles at 650 a mile, you're not going to do it. But if you look at it as I'm going to commit to the next 2 weeks every day, I'm going to get up and some combination of walking and running, I'm going to do that for 10 minutes. And then I'm not going to stop. Like if the body hurts or whatever. And, it's the commitment to incremental progress along that path. I think that folks can really help. And I think that's where these books can help people. These types of things
That's
can
right.
help people is okay. So the ultimate goal of discipline for you is to have a BMI of X, or to have you want to weigh X number of pounds because that's healthy for you, not the vanity metrics, but that's healthy for you. Whatever the goal is, folks can help people. Okay, incrementally, you can't go there tomorrow and you can't think of it in those terms, but here's an achievable chunk that you can bite off tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. And I think if you think of discipline in those terms, that's accessible for everyone.
I'm going to press you more tomorrow because I need to know. We're talking about stuff. How many years have you been running that much?
30, literally.
I mean, if it's literally, honestly, if it's anything more than 10, it's like at that point, you can drown in 2 inches of water. You can drown in 1,000 feet of water. Tomorrow, I'm going to press you more on more recent examples. I'm going to press you on areas where you were unable to find discipline and why.
Hmm.
We're going to set up a discipline challenge. And I, who doesn't believe in discipline, am going to try to learn the ways of Terry. And I think there's probably room in there as we break down my habits, which may or may not be discipline. There may be room for me to soften my stance here, both on the existence and importance of discipline and also on my own degree of discipline.
So I think for you, it's I don't want to put words in your mouth, and maybe we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but I don't think for you discipline is an issue. I think it's defining what you want to do, and what is the goal or the outcome. What is the thing that you want to apply discipline to? Because my hunch is that discipline for you is not a thing. It's formulating, it's placing reverence on things that maybe you don't place reverence on. It's having it become important.
I think there's a hump that your son isn't over yet, and that everybody has to get over at some point. They don't have to. They might just live an undisciplined life forever. But most mature adults eventually find some blend of habit and true discipline over the course of their life, and their habits become who they are and their identity, and that's how they achieve the things that they're after. And I think most young people aren't there yet because they just don't have the life experience to get through it, and they haven't done the thing that is hard enough times to make it to where it's easy again, and to where they stop thinking about it. And that's the line between discipline and habit.
And here, just in closing,
Yeah, wrap it up.
here's the frustrating part: is there is no destination.
Correct.
It doesn't stop.
We're all gonna die.
Well, I mean,
Fat,
well, that's true.
fat, skinny, slow or fast. You're all headed the same place.
Yeah, but no, that there is no. I haven't reached some spot where it's like, okay, I have become disciplined and it's been a good run. Like I've done it and I can retire from discipline. Like the need, if you want to self-actualize and become, sort of reach your individual potential, and I think maybe that's what we're trying to get at, then it's an ever evolving and changing growth process.
All right. So tomorrow, I laid out most of the plan for tomorrow. We're also going to cover my most topical to this conversation, discipline failing, and a couple of countervailing successes. And we're also going to explore the fact that really what I would like to do most of the time is nothing at all.
So this if we're this conversation tomorrow could be very vulnerable for me, because the spot where I have been undisciplined is not a fun conversation to have.
Look, I'll
So
go first. We'll talk about running. We'll talk
we'll shame you for the bulk of the segment, so
we'll
then I
talk
don't
about
feel so
X
bad.
running. We'll call tomorrow's episode is X running. There you
All
go.
right.
See you then.
Have a good one, man.